Alright, given two pipe delimited files, F1 and F2, file paths actually. F1 contains, or F1 is the file path for a file that contains accounts with fields that are pipe delimited, something kind of like this. You have account, pipe, the PIN for the account, and then another pipe followed by the balance for the account. And F2 is the file path for the file that contains the transaction instructions, which are in this format. You have a command, a pipe, the amount to apply to that command, the account number, and then the PIN. Okay, so what you should do is execute the transactions which are inside that file with these fields, and then what you are to do is store the results back into the file at file path F1. Okay, command will either be add or sub for subtract, indicating the transaction type, either a deposit or a withdrawal. Now, transactions that do not provide the correct PIN or attempt to put the account balance below 0 should be ignored. Okay, no extra output or anything, just ignored. Ignore those, skip them, keep moving. So that just means inside the file where you have the commands, if the PIN does not match what is on the account information, then skip it. And also if the command is a subtraction or a withdrawal on the account, then and the amount is greater than what's available in the balance, then skip it as well. Okay. So let's get started on this. Firstly, Python or Codio does give you two files. That's F1 and F2. They're actually file paths. Okay, they're not the files themselves. And so what we need to do is get the information and start parsing everything in. Now, if you did the pipe delimited challenge from earlier this week, then you should be able to copy and paste almost all of the code from there straight into here and just reuse it. All right, programming is all about reusable code. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to paste the code that I have in here, or I had from my other one. That was the file with the definitions for the functions of load 2D array from file, find index. Okay, set birthday is actually unneeded, so I'm just going to take that one out because that was a very specific function for the previous example. And then there's make text from 2D array. Okay, we can keep all of these, and honestly, this one, the load 2D array from file and make text from 2D array file, they don't need to be modified at all. Well, minus one little thing here on this make text from 2D array. Let's see. We should do this, and that's just because we want the final line to not have the new line character at the end. So you'll notice here what I'm doing is I'm looping through everything in the results, or everything in the records table list that's passed in, and I'm adding it, and then I'm throwing a new line on the end. That way it jumps down. But at the very last record, I don't want that new line there. So what I'm going to do is right before I return it, I'm just going to take that new line off of the very end of the string. Okay, so that's the only modification I'm making to that. That probably should have been done in the previous example, but I didn't. I overlooked that. I apologize. And now we can modify this find index one, because instead of having to search for a first and last name, we're basically just going to search for an account number. Okay, so I'm just going to change this to account number, or num for short. And then everything else, virtually everything else, is going to stay the same. Instead of searching for, and actually I'm going to change this from records, I'm going to change this to account. Okay, and that's going to be a list that has one account record. Okay, so it'll be a list though instead of this pipe delimited string. So that's the account. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to just modify this a little bit so that it meets the needs of what we're doing now. So instead of records, I want the account, and I'm checking for the account number. And if you look at the accounts, that's the very first part of that's the very first element in the list. Okay, it's not a two-dimensional list, so I only need one of those indexers, and I don't need another conditional check. I just need to check one. So if the value inside the first element in the list of the account record, okay, matches the value of the account number passed in that we're looking for, account number, then I can just return the index that I'm at. Account, oh, and I don't want to do hang on, oh no, this is going to be accounts. Accounts at 0. Yes, okay, no, that's right. So let's change that back. I apologize about that. So thinking about it again, yes, I'm going to have the full accounts list. It's going to be the full list of all of these because I'm looking for the index where the account number matches. So yes, I'm going to do index, and then I need to have the first element in that index. So this is now going to be a two-dimensional array. My apologies. And now it works, okay? So what it's going to do is it's going to loop through the whole list. First it's going to get this list. It's going to check the first element there. If that value matches the account number passed in that we're looking for, then we'll return the index. If it does not, then we move on to the next element, check that. If it doesn't work, then it moves on, and so on and so forth until we find the index, okay? And just for, yeah, and so that'll work, all right? And that's it. So those functions are now ready to go. Look at that. You were able to copy and paste and change just a few lines of code, and you've got 3 full functions. All right, next we need to have a function for the deposit, and a function for the withdrawal. Okay, def withdrawal. All right. Okay, so now let's consider what we need in here. So inside the parentheses of the function definition, this is where you define your parameters. Okay, what values do you need in order to effectively do your function, right? So in order to deposit something, I'm going to need some kind of an account record, right? And that's where I was thinking the just one record, okay? So that's why on this find index one, I goofed up on that. But in the deposit, all I want is one record, okay? Because by the time you call deposit, you should know which record you're going to be depositing, okay? Once I have the account record, then I need, I don't know, the amount to deposit maybe. Aside from that, I really don't need any extra information, so I'm not going to define those or specify those as a parameter of this function, okay? So now I have the account record, which will be, let's say this one here, it's a list. And I'm just going to show this over here real quick. Let's say I have a list of these values. All right, now these are strings, okay, so we'll have to keep that in mind. The list that comes over will have elements that are string type, okay, and we can't do math on a string, so we're going to have to convert those at some point. All right, but now we've got some element that looks, or a list that looks kind of like this, and it is referred to by the variable account. Okay, inside this function, this whole record is called account. So what I need to do is I need to add the amount here into to the amount that's being deposited, and then I need to save that amount back into here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a variable called new amount. All right, we're going to set that equal to the current balance inside this record, which is referred to by account. Okay, and it is that element 2, right? This is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. So at account 2 plus the amount. All right. Now remember, I did mention that this is a string, so this right here will cause an error, right? And this is probably telling me, oh no, just kidding, something else. So what I want to do is I want to change this to a type of number that I can do math on, okay? Which is a float. Since it's going to be a number that has a decimal point, I want it to be a float, not an integer. Integers can't have decimal points. Amount, when it comes in, it should already be an integer, or I'm sorry, it should already be a float, but so we won't need to cast that at all. All right, so that's the new amount. Now what I need to do, a new amount is going to be type float as well, as you can see here, new amount float, and that's just because I'm adding a float to another float. And so now I need to reassign the value in here, okay, to this value, but the string representation, I want to keep it a string as soon as it leaves. So I'm going to call the account again. We still want that second element, that's the one we're updating, and we're just going to set that to the string representation of new amount, okay? And there you have it. So that's it for the deposit function. the withdrawal function is going to be almost identical. Okay, so first thing I'll do is I'll copy the parameter list, because to withdrawal I only need the same information. Right? And then down here it's going to be almost the same, except instead of adding the amount, I'm going to subtract it. It is the withdrawal, right? So I'm going to subtract. Now there's one other thing that I'm going to need here inside this withdrawal, and that's because as part of the requirements, remember it says up here, transactions that attempt to put the account below 0 should be ignored. So what I want to do is I want to check and see if the amount that's being passed in is greater than the value in the balance. If it is, then I can just exit this this function and not do any kind of math. So I'm going to do a quick if statement because we're making a decision. If the amount passed in is greater than the value of the balance inside this account. Now remember, the account is going to be a list, and we want to reference the third element at the second index, okay, to see if that's right. So account at index 2, okay, and again we can't do a math comparison on from a float and a string. It's not going to work. So what I need to do is I need to cast this back over to a float. All right. So if that is true, if the amount is greater than, that means they're trying to withdraw more than they have. We're just going to exit this function. We'll just do return. Okay, that's it. That's all you got to put there. So what's going to happen is as soon as this gets called, if the amount is greater than, right, it's going to hit this line return, and it just stops this this function execution, and these lines are skipped. They don't even execute. Now if the amount is not greater than, then it skips this return line, and then it actually does execute the 2 lines below that. Okay. Sometimes you'll see where you'll have people do something kind of like this. If the amount is less than float, right, then you can do your stuff. That works too. I mean that's the exact same thing. If the amount is greater than float, then this is going to be false, and it's just going to skip and go out of there. I like the other way a little bit better. It just seems a little cleaner and more explicit to me. As you're looking through, you're going to say, all right, if the amount is greater than, okay, return. Obviously, I don't want to do anything more at that point. All right. So now we've got all our functions defined. So now we can start putting them to good use, right, and making them do something. So first thing we need to do is get the values inside these files, and we have the file paths. So the first file I'm going to read, you can read them in any order, really, as long as you don't try to use one before you have it. I'm going to read read them in order, F1 and then F2. So I'm going to do accounts equals load. I'll just copy so I don't mistype anything. And then since there is a parameter specified, okay, we have to give it some kind of a value, and that's called an argument when you're calling the function. So we're going to pass in the argument, and what this is going to do is it's going to I'm passing in the file path that Codio gave us for the accounts into here, into this function. This function will then call it, while it's inside this function, it's going to call it file path. It doesn't matter what you name it outside of this function. So file path, and it's going to open it, it's going to read it, and then it's going to return all the information to me in a 2-dimensional array. Sweet, I'm going to have Python do all the work for me. Now I'm also going to have one called commands, and it's going to be the exact same. Why doesn't it autofill there? That's weird. Alright, it's going to be the exact same, except now I'm giving it the other file instead of F1, right? And I want to give it F2 because that's where that's the file path that contains the command information. Okay, so you can call functions as many times as you want or as you need. They're going to do the exact same thing, but in this case, since I'm providing 2 different arguments, they're returning 2 different things. So it's amazing how these functions work, and it's just they can be so powerful, and it saves you a lot. Imagine having to type all of this out twice just to get 2 different files when it's the exact same code, and you can just call it twice, and there you go. Saves you some typing, saves you some real estate there. All right. So now we have in the accounts variable, we have a two-dimensional array that holds this information inside the accounts file. And then in the commands variable, we have a two-dimensional array that holds all of this stuff, the commands, right? Add, sub, add, all this stuff. So that's what we're going to actually start processing. So we're going to go through each command and start applying those to the accounts if we can. Okay, so the way I'm going to start that out, we're just going to do a for loop, right? For, and I'm just going to call it command in commands. Okay, so what do we need to do now? At some point here, we're going to have a call to our deposit and a call to our withdrawal. But first, let's see. We need to make sure that, I'll tell you what, let's find the index for the account that we need to, for the account that we're going to try to modify first. So we've got our function here called findIndex. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call it account index. And you can call it whatever you want as long as it makes sense to you and you're consistent. You use the same name later. Okay, we're going to do findIndex. And then we need to tell what we need to tell this function what it needs, or give the function the information that it needs. So if you look at findIndex, it needs accounts and it needs the account number. So we'll just give it the accounts, and it just so happens in this case that they're the same name. This could be any other name here, and it would be referred to in this function as accounts because that's what it's called here. All right, so we're going to give it the whole two-dimensional array of accounts, and then we're going to give it the account number that we're looking for, and that's going to be inside this command object. So the first iteration, the account number we're looking for is this one here. Okay, 654321. Very original account number, I know. All right, so it's going to be inside the command object that we're in, the command list, and it's at the position of, let's see, 0, 1, 2. Okay, remember lists always start at 0. So there we go. And then the findIndex, what that's going to do is it's going to have the full list, and it's going to have the account number that it's looking for. It's going to loop through, it's going to look for it and see if it matches. If it does, it's going to return that index, and now we have that under account index. Okay? So the next thing that I think we should check is to make sure that the pins match. And in this, doing the order of these isn't super important. I like to check all the stuff I can first, and then if it doesn't meet the requirements, then I skip the code underneath it. Otherwise, if it is good, then I can execute. So hopefully that'll make sense here in just a second. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to check for the pins and make sure those match. So we now have the account index, so that'll give us the ability to pull just one of these records, right? And then we can check the pin inside that record and compare it with the pin that is inside the command or the transaction. All right, so I'm going to pull from the accounts list, accounts at account index. All right, that now pulls a list that resembles something, it resembles something more along the lines of this, right? So I'll tell you what, why don't I'm just going to move this down here so I can see it, so we can reference it real quick. Okay, so I have accounts at account index is going to pull back a list that resembles something to this effect. Now what I need to do is I need to look inside this list for this value. Okay, so I need another indexer, and I need to pull index number 0, index number 1, because that's the one that has the pin. And I want to compare that to the pin inside the command. Okay, and I'm going to pull one of these two just so we can compare both of those. Alright, so bear with me here while I get this set up real quick. And something like that. Alright, so just for visualization purposes, let's say that's the account and that's the command. So now we want to check the pin inside the command. And we're going to say, okay, so we have here, and that should actually be an if because I'm making a decision. If that, the pin on the account record is the same as the pin in the command record, and in this case, command is only single dimensional, so we don't have to do 2 indexes, we just have to do 1, and we want to check this last index, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, right? That'll work. Also, you could do -1. That'll automatically pull the last element of the list. So if you specify a negative number here, it starts from the back of the list and works its way backwards. So if you do -1, well, that's this one, -2, -3, -4, right? But we'll just do 3 for this purpose. Okay. So if they are, actually, I'm going to say here, if they are not the same. Okay, if they do not equal, then skip the transaction. We don't want to do this, so we're just going to do continue. And the way the keyword continue, when used inside a loop, it skips this iteration and moves on to the next iteration and rechecks the condition. Okay, in this case, it'll just move on to the next command in the list if there is one. If there's not, then it ends. The keyword break is similar, but instead of moving on to the next iteration, it breaks the loop entirely, and the loop is done. Okay, in this case, I don't want to end the loop entirely, I just want to skip this one iteration. Okay, so we'll do continue there. All right, so now at this point in my code, at line 55 here, I know, okay, that the pins match, and I have an account index. So now what I need to do is I need to check the command and see if it's subtraction or addition, if I want to do a deposit or a withdrawal. So I'm going to check the command object, the command list, and that's going to be at, well, here's my command, it's the very first element. So if the command 0 is equal to add, then I know I want to do my deposit. Okay, so at this point, I don't have to do any further checking because I already know that the pins match. Okay. So we're going to call our deposit function, and what does deposit want? Oh, here it is. It wants the account, which is just the one record, okay, not the two-dimensional list, just the one record, the account, and the amount to deposit. So we're going to give it the account, right? So that's, I have my full 2D list here in accounts, right? That's what it's called. But I want just the one record, so I'm going to use this account index that I found earlier, and we're going to pass that over, so that will pull back just one record inside my two-dimensional array or two-dimensional list, and that'll pass it in here. And now the deposit function knows what to do with just the single-dimensional list. All right, and now we also need to pass in the amount, and that's going to be found in the command object, the command list, and it is at the second element, which is the position 1 or index 1. Okay, so that'll pull the amount, and we're calling the deposit function, passing in the account to deposit the amount. Makes sense? And that's it. So the deposit is done. Now we'll check the other one, elif, and I'm gonna do a command here, or another an elif instead of just an else. That way, if let's say they put I don't know, div or something else, whatever, mul for multiply, it's not going to actually run any of these commands. It's only going to do the ones that are recognized. Okay, if it equals sub, then we're going to do virtually the exact same thing, except in this case, we're not going to call deposit, we're going to call withdrawal. There you are. Right, and it's the same stuff that we're passing in, so we can leave those the same. And that's it. So you can see here, I mean, when you have all your functions defined, the actual meat and potatoes of the code is really short. I mean, look at this. I've got all the stuff that's actually doing anything in this script is right here. That's it. You can see that on these, what is that, 10 lines, 12 lines, 13? But all the rest of it, all the real stuff that's doing the hard work is defined up here and out of the way. So if you want to really just kind of read through the code and see what's happening, you can just start on here. Okay, accounts, load 2D array from file. Cool, I'm passing that in. The commands. All right, I'm cool. I'm getting that. And then if you're coming down here and you go, okay, find index. I want to know what's happening inside this this function. Then you can go up and look at it and look at it for. You can look further and just kind of really dive in and figure out exactly what's going on. But right here, this is really just a high-level overview of what's happening inside the program. So functions are great. They make things super easy, simple, and readable, which is extremely important, and I can't iterate enough. But readability is super important because code is more often read than written. Real code. Code for school and Codio, it's typically more time writing than reading. You're probably never going to go back and look at this. But there you go. That's it. So that's our entire loop. Okay. So for each loop, for each command inside the command, it's going to do this, right? It's going to just iterate over that over and over. Bam, 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 just for each command in there, right? And if we get one where the pin doesn't match, it skips it. And we have inside our withdraw function, it checks to see if it's getting to be 0 or if it's going to be below 0. If it is, then it skips inside the withdraw function, so we don't even have to worry about that down here. All right, so we need to remove our indentations back to the level of the 4 here, otherwise it's defined inside the loop, and that's not what we want. But now what we need to do is we need to basically put all the information that is inside the counts back into the file that we read originally, which was F1. Okay, so I'm going to say, I don't know, let's call it output string, and we're going to set it equal to, we have a function to do this, right? For, oops, not commands, we want that to be accounts. Dynamic accounts. Let's pick the right one here. All right, so again, we just added one line to do a whole bunch of work for us inside this, inside the body of the script, the real meat and potatoes of the script. All right. So now once this executes, and that's right here, boom, that's going to run through this loop and bring back the exact data that we need. Now we can just go ahead and write it back out. And this will go ahead and do our with open. We want to open up our original file F1. Okay. This time for writing, so we're going to use W for write. And then we're just going to call it, I don't know, we'll call it writer. So now we're going to do writer.write, and we're going to pass in the string that we made out of our two-dimensional array or list. Array and list, it kind of depends on the language you're using. Python, they're typically called lists, but arrays are used in many of the other languages. So either one, they're the exact same thing. There you have it. So we write it out, and that should be it. So as you can see, since we defined a whole bunch of functions, the entire script that does all the work, or the entire script is really only these, what, 20 lines? Not even 20 lines? And that's it. All the real stuff is happening behind the scenes. You don't even see it. So this is a really good way to abstract things. And I can't iterate that enough. Functions are so important, and they make things so much easier and simpler. And yeah, so let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. So just for comparison's sake, I'm going to copy what is currently there. Okay. And we'll hold that right down here, and then we can compare it to what is written out. So let's hope this runs and has no errors. Let's run that. Oh, we got an error. All right, well, that's fine. Let's take a look and see what it says. So deposit, type unsupported operand for float and string. Oh, so there must have been a spot where I forgot to convert. And yes, there is. So let's take a look here in our deposit. Here we go. So remember, our command came through something like this. I forgot to convert it, this one, to a string. I did it inside my my deposit function and my withdraw function, right? I converted the value here, but I even told you guys, I said, hey, this is probably going to come in as a float, and I forgot to send it in as a float. So let's do that here. So we just need to cast that value to a float. Come on. And we'll do that here because we're going to get the same error on the withdraw. Float. There we go. All right, so let's try running that again, see what happens. There we go. No errors, no output. So let's check our file and see what we get. So this is what it was originally, the 981, blah, 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 blah. Aha, and there we have it. 1140, 68, 8, 82, 35. That's a nice bank account. That one didn't change, it looks like. 245, 99, 65, 10. That one changed. So a couple of them changed, a couple of them didn't. So there you have it. And that's file operations and a whole bunch of stuff going on, and we made it super simple by defining our functions, and then just calling them as we needed them, and yeah, that's it. So hope that made sense to you. There you have it.